Welcome back and thank you for joining me. I am Gregory Daines, an artist at Circa 1990, and here I am in the Hyper Studio in Ashford, and I have prepared a lino block and I have cut in the design and masked it up with some yellow print medium, and this just gives me a sharper relief, though I know where I've cut, because when you cut into the material it can look a bit of a similar colour to the surface. So my initial cuts are always just checking to see if the gauge is right and if the knife blade is sharp enough. And then once that's gone, I start cutting, and I always cut a very easy cut to begin with, because sometimes it can be, you just kind of fall out of practice. So this gives me the opportunity just to kind of start getting a feeling of things. I'm going at the bottom of the design here, and just getting just re-familiarising myself with how this works. I've recently bought myself a new camera for Circa 1990, so bear with me whilst I sort of experiment and choose different camera angles. If you have any feedback about how you think these work, then do let me know. It's all a bit of an experiment and all part of playing as doing the work and filming it all at the same time. So here I've got a bit of a time lapse. It's not a particularly interesting element of the cutting. It's just cutting the base and the border. So I've sort of sped this up, but you'll see it's these are the sort of things these take probably about half an hour to cut this section, and then I'll cut more of the main face of the print. Usually I shy away from doing human figures, but more recently I have been doing life drawing classes as part of a collective that I'm part of, and that's kind of given me a bit of confidence to try and tackle the human form again. So this design is based on a sculpture. So the idea about it is it looks like it's carved from stone or marble, and I guess there's a sort of sense of double layering here, because of course I'm also cutting this myself from lino. And it's a bit of an exploration of shadow and light. It's only going to ever be incorporated with just one colour of ink. So I just cut away the light, and what's left is the shadow. I also quite like this design because it is highlighting this man's facial hair. So it's a moustache, which I'm working on here, and then I sort of work with hair, and it's always quite difficult cutting hair, because otherwise you can either cut strands or you can sort of block it into locks. And in this case I've done locks, and it's always a little bit difficult to get the sort of movement, but with this I kind of feel like I've got a very good balance of light and dark. Around the face there's an awful lot of detail work, not only in sort of trying to carve the sort of hairlines, but also trying to get definition of where the eyes and the nose goes without getting a sort of different levels of sizes of eyes or these sort of things. When you're cutting, you can't, once you've cut, you can't take away again. You can only keep removing material, you can't add it back. So it's quite a careful, delicate approach, and I'm always very cautious not to cut too far away. I always try to cut away from myself. Here I've just changed the camera angle a little bit for you. It's more fixed, and here I'm just trying to very delicately carve around the hair locks. It's kind of quite difficult to do this at this scale. I couldn't do this design any smaller than it is here, because the thickness of the blade, even with just the gauge 1 blade, which is the smallest one I have, it's just too big really to get in between them. So I've had to sort of shave off a little bit more than I really wanted to, but in the end I'm still quite happy with the resulting cut. the ear and things are mostly on this side of the face in shadow. So there's not very much to cut away, but I wanted a little bit of definition. Otherwise, it's almost as if that with the hair, he loses his ear altogether. So I spent a little bit of time trying to get a bit of shadow and light on the ear there. And then I'm just sort of carving away from the edge of the face, because later on I will start cutting the lino block out entirely. The benefit of that is that any lino block that isn't there, I can't be accidentally picking up print. Sometimes I like to cut it quite roughly and leave sort of strands around it. It kind of creates like a sort of aura around the piece of the lino cut. I think that often has quite a nice effect, but for this, because I've already got the sort of sides around the neck and the face, I wanted to keep that as the only extravagant extra side of the piece. The hair was definitely the area which I felt most anxious about doing, but you'll see that I took my time, and this was probably about 2 hours worth of time. I've sped up here, so it's hard to kind of gauge, but after about 2 hours I felt like I kind of got the hair where I wanted it. And then of course here I've just cropped it out entirely of the backing bit of lino, and I start the inking process. So with this first run, I've done pure black, so it's just printing block ink, a water-based ink, and I roll it thinly, and I try and roll it so it kind of hisses as a kind of noise, and that tells me that I've got just about enough ink on the roller before I roll it onto the lino block. I always try and roll it onto a sacrificial piece of paper, because any ink that goes on there I can then remove and put it on the cutting board, which I'm using as a printing pad. And then I put some felt over the top, and that really makes a very firm amount of pressure over the whole printing block. And here is the first reveal. Really happy how he comes out. An awful lot of times my first print I discard, but actually this, apart from a little bit of ink which is missing on the bottom, has been a really successful print. There was a little bit of lint on the printing block, so I used a brush just to push that away. And then here are the subsequently second, third and fourth prints. I then mixed up some ink in some different colours to give a bit of a bronzy colour, and I produced 4 further prints. Here they are, hanging up to dry. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to subscribe, please do so. Thank you so much.